Yeah, hello, this is Freskitty So I'm still sick right now. This is the third tutorial I'm recording today, trying to get some temporary tutorials out for the Cat V2. Um, I'll try to make this one quick. This one I'm going to show how to convert V1 to V2 textures. This is probably one of the ones I should really spend longer on, but I'm already kind of been talking a little bit too long. So what you'll want to do is download Blender. You can get it through Steam. Um, it's free. It's an open source project. It's a great place to create 3D things. It's where I've been making things since like 2007. Um, so you can do a lot with Blender. But for today, we're just going to use it to convert the textures between the old UVs to the new UVs. Um, by the end, you'll kind of see why I did this, why I changed the UVs. What we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and open up Blender. Let me just double make sure I'm recording. Yes, I'm recording. You open up Blender. I go to File, Open, and then we want to navigate to where we downloaded the conversion files. So on Gumroad, you'll have gotten a Cat V2 conversion tools. Excuse me. Excuse me. Sorry. You'll get a zip folder conversion tools. You want to unzip it by right-clicking on it in Windows and extracting it. Let me show that Windows. So in Windows, you'll see this conversion tools. Right click, extract all, and click extract. I already did that, which gave me this folder, which we can select here in Blender. Click into it twice, and then you'll see three different conversion tools. So we have V1 to V2. This is if you're using an old cat texture and you want to go to a new cat texture, the V2 cat. We have a V2 to V1 backwards. This sends a cat V2 texture back to a cat V1. This is important for the cat chin model. The cat chin currently still uses some cat V1 UVs. So if you want to go backwards from cat V2 back to cat V1 and not have to recreate your textures for your cat chin, um, this you'll follow all the steps in here, but the UVs will be set up backwards, and it should work very similar. Some of the materials may be different order, but it'll be very similar. And then there's a beta V2 to V2 V2. This is just for some clothing and other options that were in the beta that were slightly different. If you didn't play around the beta, which was on Gumroad for a few months while I was trying to get everything up and ready for final, you don't have to worry about this unless you use the beta and you're pre-invested into the beta. There's a few folks, maybe like 3 or 5 people that I saw using the beta, so that's only a few handful of people that want to do that. But for most people, you just want to go from V1 textures to V2. So we'll click on that and we'll click open. Give it a second to open. And Blender always takes a little bit of time to load in the shaders, especially if you're have an older computer. So all the materials are broken out into different objects and they're selected by all by default. We'll go ahead and start with the accessories. So let's click on the accessories, um, and then in here you'll see I guess 4 panels. This panel up here on the top left is the texture output. So this is what the texture will look like in 2D space once we're done. You can, on this image icon up here, you can select the different ones. Everything that starts with 3A's is the output. So once we're done, all our textures will be saved out here. And the reason the UVs have changed is if you look at this, you can pretty quickly figure out where each part of the body is in 2D space. So you can see this belly marking. You can see, oh, this is the belly. And you can see the back of the head stripes here. This is the new breast piece. So instead of just morphing the body, there's actually a hidden breast piece. Oh, it's up here right now. That comes forward and meshes with the body. So this improves the quality of lighting and the general shape on the female anatomy or large chest anatomy, however you want to call it. Um, you can see the legs down here, the face, the back, the tail, this tail floof, mouth parts, teeth and claws. So everything's sort of clumped up together where you can really see where it is. If you want to pan around in here, just hold down the middle mouse button. You can do this. I think on the laptop it's Alt. If you go to Preferences, uh, somewhere in the Preferences, I want to say there's a way to emulate a 3-button mouse by holding Alt for laptops. I just don't remember where that is. It's been a very long time since I've really had a laptop. I have a very old laptop. I don't really use it much. Um, but somewhere in here, if you're having troubles navigating on a laptop, I just recommend Googling it, and someone will have a tutorial on how to enable the laptop controls. But just hold down middle mouse if you want to look around texture. But over here is all the textures. Ace are the ones we'll want as outputs and save them and stuff. And they're all of them are down to the size that will be used in Unity. So you can see this 4K, 2K, 1K. That's the texture size. Um, if you want a larger texture for any reason, you can just go to Image, Resize, and then put in the dimensions, and then save it out so you don't lose those dimensions, and you can rebake to um, get that new texture size if you really want something higher. Um, but that's what this panel is. The next panel is the shader. Um, so most of these objects over here in this hierarchy will have only one shader. The accessories is unique where it has 2 shaders. I'll get into that in a little bit. But this will be where we'll be putting in our old textures and where we'll be making sure we have the correct texture selected at the end so that when we click bake, it bakes it to the correct thing and we can save it out from this top menu at the end. But that's the shader menu. Here is the 3D viewport, the big center part. This just allows us to see the avatar and make sure everything is showing up correctly. You can use the middle mouse button to rotate, shift middle mouse to move side to side, and you can do Alt middle mouse and just drag around to get some snapping and zooming in, scrolling with the middle mouse button to scroll in and out. That's how you navigate it and look around. I think by default, yeah, by default, left clicking will select objects in here. So alternatively than clicking them over here, you can just select them in game, or in the viewport. I prefer just to select them over here probably. The selecting on the side is technically slightly different. I don't know if that was ever fixed, but there's some weird slight differences there. But you want to select, you can use this hierarchy over here to select, and then down here you want to have this material selected because that's really what we're using for the most part, and you want to select the material. You can select the material we're going to be working with. Most of these objects are just one material. You can see from this list they only have one material. Accessories unique and S2. The only other options we'll be using in this little toolbar here is this 3-triangle data. We'll want to make sure that UVMap v2 is highlighted, has a camera, and is highlighted on all of these objects. It should be saved out that way, so if you just click through all these objects, it'll show that v2 is selected. I went back through and I made sure before I did the final. If you're using the pre-release accidentally had v1 selected, but on the release it should have v2 selected. This is important because The selected one is what Blender bakes to. It doesn't bake to the one that has the camera, which is bizarre. The camera is just the default. If there is no UV selected, that is what a texture will use, is the default camera. And then the selected one is what it bakes to. Unity's baking is unclear. It does not have any sort of clear tutorial or anything. You have to know how to say Unity's baking, Blender's baking. Blender doesn't have any clear tutorials on baking, so you have to make sure you have things selected in different windows, which is very bizarre, and that's why this tutorial can get a little confusing for new people to Blender. But I did my best to have everything pre-selected. So this UV map v2 is selected, and the very last tab we'll use is this render tab, which is where we'll click the bake, which is below my activate windows. This is just an extra throwaway install of Windows, so I don't need to activate it, but there's the bake, which we'll do at the very end. Okay, so that's what we're looking at here in Blender. I'm going to go ahead and go back to this material view here and scroll back up so we can see our materials. And I'm going to go one by one and show you what we need to change here. So the accessories is two materials. We'll start with the accessories main. So in here we see a total of three of these gray, or I call it brown orange little texture boxes. And again, I'll have this little texture icon. And it has these packaged in textures by default to kind of show that here's a V1 bubbles texture that we're converting to a V2 bubbles texture. These bottom two textures have this UV map V1 going into them. So this uses the old UV system. It's going into these two textures, and then that's going into this material here that's displaying it in the viewport. And this third unconnected texture up here is what we'll be baking it to. It doesn't have any connections to the material or anything else. It just sits here. Before we click bake at the very end, we'll want to make sure that this texture here is selected with this white border around it, because this is what tells Blender on this material slot right here, this is the texture we want to bake to. Again, this is kind of weird, and Blender doesn't tell you this anywhere on where it's going to bake to and what it uses to bake. So you have to know in advance how it works. But for now, we just want to make sure our character in the viewport looks like our old character under V1. So what we'll do is we'll go down here to the colors that are, the textures that are being used, and we'll change them out. So what you want to do is at the end, I'm going to zoom in so it's a little bit easier. That's with scrolling in the middle mouse button. If you hold it down, you can move around. But you want to hit the X, and that will cancel out the texture. And then what you want to do is click open, and we'll find the texture that corresponds to this one. So let's see. I went ahead and copied an old material. I believe it's for Pally. Yep, it's for Pally. So this is a V1 Pally, and I'll show how to convert Pally. So right here, this is looking for accessories. So under accessories, main, color. Before I X'd out, this was a bubbles accessories color. So I want to pick a similar one. So this is just the flat color instead of the emissions. So let's click open. And now if I'm going to navigate around the viewport, and if I rotate over here, you can see that Pally is now the base color, but something's off. There's still this bubbles here. That's because the emissions is still set to bubbles. So you can see this texture for emissions is going into the emissions over here. So I want to do the same thing, where we click X, And then we click open, and we want to navigate to that same folder, and then there's an emit version. Not everyone used the emit on theirs. Baking out emissions and diffuse color is different in Blender. They're two different final bakes. So if you don't have emissions on your avatar, you can just ignore it. Um, there was emissions on the body by default for avatars in the past for the blush. That has been replaced by a decal. Um, so you don't need to bake out the blush anymore. It's now on there by default for PC. Standard Light on Quest at this moment doesn't support decals, though VRChat says they're experimenting with adding that in the future. Um, so for both, you don't need to worry about the body emission anymore, unless you have your own emission, which you can now set up independent of the blush, which is neat. But for here, we're still working on accessories, so we're going to put in the emit for Pally, and you can see, voila, the bubbles name is gone, and where we did want emissions are now back. So that's the first slot of the accessories, the main ones. And then here is stockings. Stockings is new. So in V2, stockings were, or V1 stockings were just a texture on the body. It was a texture swap. There was no new mesh for it. There was no material for it. Now it's a part of the accessories. And it's this new geometry. Some people don't like it as much as the old texture. There is still the option of texture in those stockings in the Substance Painter if you really want those old stockings. But if you want to use the new stockings, which are a little bit shorter, more like warmers, um, you can emulate from the old texture. So what we're going to do is it's using this old, uh, goodness gracious, this is one of the things I wanted to do was actually review some of these things because this is the more complex part of it. So, but we're just going to wing it and you'll see as I relearn what I did. So we're going to go to the body color stockings and we're going to click X. And even though this is accessories, even though we're clicking accessories over here and it's accessory stockings, for this one, we are going to use the old body uh, texture that had the stockings on it. So in here, let's see, I think this one I called femboy. I think I tried to stop using that term later on because some people found it a little bit offensive. So sorry if that's not a term to your liking, but can select that for the stockings. Nothing changed because by default it looks like I put in the value of 1 for this input here, which is replace new stockings. We're wanting to use the old stockings, so we're going to set this out. You can drag it or just click on it and type in 0, and you'll see it's now using the old one. This is the old um, texture, and it's not perfect, but it gets the general idea of what Poly used to have, and at this point we could just call it done. Um, Alternatively, there's this other box here called Add Cloth Texture, and we could set that up to um, like 1, and you can see it adds in this new kind of cloth-like pattern to it. It's a little pixelated, but you can see that it's adding some detail to it, and can change it below 1 to like 0.02 or something to get a weaker cloth-like texture. Um, Alternatively, what we can do is set this cloth texture to 0 and set this replace with new stockings to 1. And what this does is it allows us to create new stockings with the new everything on a fly. So there's two colors here. There's the lighter color and a darker color. And this is just like the Blender tool for recoloring. You want to we can, if you just want a flat um, color, what we can do is set both points to the exact same color. And that'll give us some flat stripes with no texturing to them. So let's say if we just wanted flat white and a flat, let's go to RGB, pure blue. Uh, we can just set these colors here on this ramp, and wow, we just have white and blue. Excuse me. Sorry, I was coughing. Let me see if, okay, the audio's back. Set them to flat blue. Alternatively, if you want a little bit of texturing, you can like darken, you can change the colors here. So it's a little bit of a color ramp, and that gives you back your texturing. Same on this side, can reduce that a little bit to get back. I don't know why it's doing some weird, bizarre, like up to 2. There's a weird bug in Blender sometimes where when you're changing colors, it gets a little broken. But for some reason it fixes itself. But yeah, we can use that to set up um, some stockings if we wanted that. And that's the most complex that this gets. The rest is pretty easy going forward. The accessories is the most complex one. And then, okay, let's go to body. Body is just like that first material and accessories. So I click body, there's only one material. And you see there's 2 textures. Um, there's the blush for the emission. We don't need that because the blush again is replaced by a decal on the body. So we can ignore that. It'll still bake out when we're doing emissions, but we don't really need to change that. Um, if you did have your own custom emissions, this is where you put it here for the body, but otherwise you'd ignore that. If you're that deep into customizing Cat V1, then you're probably pretty familiar with most everything that's happening here already. Um, but for the bubbles, or for the main color here that goes right into this base color, we'll want to click the X, open, find our body texture, just the plain one, no stockings on it, unless you really want to have your avatar always with like say the clothes or something on by default. But I'm just gonna do um, just a plain body. See it showing up fine. That's all good. I'm gonna go to eyes. There's only one texture for the eyes. Um, it's used for both the emission and the body color. In Unity, there is on the PC side, there is a mask for the eyes, which slightly dims some of the colors on the emission. But by by default, just using the one colors. Eyes have a slight emission, so that they have less shading on them. You can see them a little bit in the dark, which has a neat effect. Alternatively, you could just turn shading off and it could probably similar look, but with no emission. But anyways, we're going to open the old texture. Here we go, select it, and then if we move up, you can see, hey, got the old Pally eyes going. Um, watch, uh, slightly different than the rest because there was no original separate watch mesh. Um, in the V2, the watch is separate, which actually does allow the watch to eventually be converted out to a separate asset that can be sold or whatever on, or I could sell on Gumroad because it's the thing I made, but I may eventually separate out the watch and have it as its own accessory on Gumroad. I'm not sure. But it's now its own mesh, so that's all neat. Um, but it used to be part of the old accessories, so that's why it's using accessory colors. So what you want to do is X out again, open the accessories color, and voila, it's Pally's. And you want to do that same for the emissions, because the watch does use some emissions for like the face dial numbers and stuff. Um, I could do this. I didn't add a layer to add in the the newer labeling. The new watches have labels. That was getting a little too complex. I didn't want to overdo it. So yeah, it's just the old watch texture. Glasses, most people can ignore this. This is just changing over the gradient, which isn't really used. The lenses of the glasses um, have their own special PC shader that doesn't really need to use that. If you're doing something special with the lenses before, then you can now convert it over. Um, Honestly, you don't really need to. You could just use the old um, lenses. If you still have the old file, you can get that FBX over and just attach it to the head as is, the same name and everything. It'll probably work just fine. But if you need to convert it for the V2 lenses, you can do that here. Very few people had the hat, but if you had a hat, you can put in the hat here. Let's see, undo that because I don't think I copied over a hat to convert. So let's just pretend that I clicked X here and I selected a hat color. Once you do that, I'll move all the way over back to the hat so you can see what's going on. But I added some options where you can now add these new hat Hug Life logo to the back of the hat if you want. So you can change the strength of it from 0, which is, oh, you don't want the new logo, to 1 on here if you want the logo, similar to how there's that texturing on the stockings. And then here for this input here, you can change the color of it. It's not a color ramp, instead it's just a flat color, which is probably good enough for just a little logo. So you can change it, make it pink or whatever. You can change the strength of it to like say 0.2 or something, so it's can slightly see what's below the hat, or what the base color of the hat was. So that's a new little tool just to add on the Hug Life logo. Then we're going to look at V1 here. It's very similar to the others, just V1 hair is that mop style hair. So you just want to click X, open. It's the original long hair. It's just called long hair before, but now it's called V1. So yeah. And then hair. Oh yeah, there's only one hair texture for the last one. So you just click on hair, and yeah, it'll use the old hair texture. Similar for short hair. They're now separate materials, short and long hair. So you just click the old hair texture. And voila. So everything is now being shown as Pally or whatever avatar you're putting in. So now is the fun part where it can get a little bit convoluted, which is baking it out so that we have these textures up here that I showed at the very beginning, these AAA ones. We want these to be replaced with the output for our conversion. So what we're going to do is very carefully or very meticulously go through each of these objects, and we're going to make sure that we have the correct thing selected. So let's select accessories. And for each material over here in this material view, we want to make sure this top standing alone texture that's labeled AAA is selected. This will tell Blender to bake to this texture. We want this box and this box only to have white around it. So select that. And we're since accessories has 2 materials, we need to do that for both of them. Select. Luckily enough, it does not matter which material we have selected at the end. It'll bake out each material in here, but we'll need to make sure that both materials have this accessories selected. And we'll go through each one, and we'll do that. So body already has select. I'll just click it again, or you can click off, and if you're paranoid, click it again, just to make sure Blender knows that this is what's selecting what it's being baked to. Some of the eyes, I'll click off, click on it again. Watch, again. So yeah, it's just this one that's not connected to anything that starts with AA that's on top. Lenses aren't too important, but we'll go ahead and do that one as well. Yeah, because we were changing stuff down here, we accidentally selected this Hug Life color. We'll want to click off of that and then click on the AAA texture. Do that same for the long hair and do the same for the short hair. And the next thing to double make sure for each object is what I talked about at the very beginning, where we want UV maps, UV map V2 selected, and we'll go through and make sure that is selected on every single mesh. And it looks like it is, which means at this point we are now ready to export. So just click out here anywhere in this viewport. What I could do is select up here on the top, select all. What that does is it highlights all of the objects, and at this point it's telling Blender, hey, we want to bake everything that's selected, and we have all of our new stuff selected, so I'll bake all of these and bake them all into textures. Once we have everything selected, I want to click on the camera over here, and we can change some settings over here. By default, I have the render set to 12 samples. We actually only need one for baking, but 12 just gets rid of any weird artifacting that might happen from any sort of special stuff you did in the baking. In this case, we don't really need it, but let's go ahead and leave it as 12. The bake is usually pretty fast. If you're having issues and it's being slowed, you can set it to 1. Something that you probably should do before you go any further is go to File and Save. Because baking can crash, it can break. We don't want to lose all the work we've gotten to this point. If you know what this tool is already, you can go through it pretty fast, but if you're following this tutorial, it's probably been 30 minutes or so, and you don't want to lose setting it up. So let's go ahead and save it, and then here is where the magic happens. This bake button will bake all of these V1 textures to the V2. And there's two different type of bakes. There is bake diffuse and bake emit. Emit is the emissions. They'll bake out the emissions, which for this is just the watch, which has the emissions, the accessories, which has the emissions, and the face, which has that flush emission that we don't really we don't really have a need for. We'll go ahead and start with diffuse. And diffuse, you'll want to make sure that direct and indirect are unchecked. This is lighting. We don't want lighting to affect the output from our model. We just want to have the pure original color, which is why color will be selected. Target, image textures. Yep, that's right. We want to have it. I didn't know you could even bake to color attribute. That is real cool. You can do that now. May has always been there. I'm stupid, but you can bake textures. You can clear texture if you want. There's no point to clear in this case because of the margins. So the margin is set to extend. I really recommend extend. For a while, Blender was replacing extend. Like if you had an older version of Blender, like 3.0 when you saved, and then you went to I think 3.1 or 3.2, it would set the default margin to adjacent faces because this is a new feature. I don't recommend adjacent faces. It breaks for me. Extend is better. What happens with the margins is I'm going to do something. You don't need to do this on your screen, but oops. This is just for demo reasons. I don't follow this part. But if I go into edit mode on the body, you can see these are the UV islands for the avatar. And there's a little bit of space between each of these parts. So here's the front belly, and there's a little bit of there's a little bit of distance between it and the arm. What margins does is it helps extend out the color from these UV islands. This is very important because as you get farther away from an object in 3D games, it will downscale the texture. This helps for mostly visual reasons. When you have a large texture forced into a small space on your screen, the game doesn't know what color to pick from that texture. It doesn't sample 10 colors and 10 pixels of that texture and average them into 1 pixel if your character's far away. Instead, it'll just pick one of those 10 pixels that are inside the pixel on the screen and just show them. So this creates weird shimmering effects if you have um, what's called mip-mapping turned off. Um, what the game does is it preferably you want mip-mapping turned on, which will downsize the texture as you get farther away. The and it'll do that kind of auto whatchamacallit averaging of those larger number of pixels down to a smaller pixel, so the game is more likely to choose the correct color and reduce that shimmering effect. Um, but when you're mip-mapping and you're scaling down those textures when the game does it for you automatically, these margins between islands will kind of shrink and get moved around. So that's why we need to have a margin method selected. And here, I prefer extend, so it just takes out what's on the edge of this island, just extends out the color until it meets um, the extension from another island. Um, Adjacent faces would look at the actual mesh, and let's say here at the arm seam, it'd be like, oh, here's the arm seam. I'm going to look at what's on the other side of the arm seam. So the belly, it would just come over here and say, oh, here it is on the right side. I'm going to go over to the right arm, which I think is this one up here, and I take the same color starting over here. Ideally, it's better, but it can have weird things, especially if you have multiple faces coming out of here. Like the mouth may have like 3 or 4 things in this weird corner over here coming out. So it can cause some weird, bizarre effects. So and it sometimes it just makes out black. I don't know why that was a bug in Blender for a while. I think it's fixed in newer versions, but um, I really recommend just um, using Extend. So I'm gonna get back from that tangent and tab back out. Um, and as long as you didn't try to follow what I was doing there and thing, we should still have everything selected. I was just doing that for demo purposes, but we want everything selected. Get back from the tangent. Make sure extend is selected, and you can put whatever size. Anything like over 100 is good. The higher the size takes longer. I just put in 2000, which is half of the image size for the largest texture. Um, it just makes sure that there is no spots on the map that are not colored. If you had it set to 0, there would be no color extending out from those maps, and instead just be pure black behind the islands, which will cause weird black seams when map mapping comes into effect. So just make sure the margins are set, and everything else is fine. Shouldn't need to change it. And at this point, we can hit the button that we all been waiting for, which is bake. Let's click bake. This will take a little bit of time, so it's going through. You can see it actively selecting different textures over here on the top left, and it is what it does what it's doing, which is turn baking, which it takes those old V1s, they bake it sort of like hanging it up on the model. It's not what it actually does, but bakes it onto the model and then produces out this V2 textures. Yeah, it'll take a little bit of time. You can see the progress down here. If you have an older computer, it may take a little bit longer. Um, Usually that when on older computers, once it hits 100%, it'll have rendered out all these different 12 samples and I've averaged them together. And now it's just taking some time to do the extend here, this margin. That calculation can take some time. So just be patient as your computer goes through it. So here we've baked out the diffuse colors, and this is the base colors for all the different materials. And if we go up here, we can again select all of them, and you can say, hey, we got Pali, we can see the color, we can see that it's a bit easier to read than the old textures. It's very clear that Pali's up here. You can now write this. I think on the original you had to like turn it upside down or flip it or something to write text on it, which was very annoying. But now we can just change any of this on a 2D platform if we want to. You can see here's Pali, here's the chest, here's the legs, and the arms, and the tail. You can see where everything is pretty quickly. There's still a little bit of guesswork. There's this one spot here which should be like up here, but for texture saving reasons I had to put it down here as kind of the only place it fit. But for most things it is pretty clear where everything is. And you can look through. Yep. So all the results are looking good. So what I want to do is there's this asterisk next to the image. This is because Blender does not save out images by default. Blender, if you click File Save on Blender, it will not. Oops. No. Okay, it didn't recover. Shoot. That would have been a bad end to the tutorial if I had accidentally clicked this. Um, but Blender does not, by default, when you click Save, it does not save these images. Um, and if you try to close out, it'll say, hey, you have unsaved images. What do you want to do? Even if your Blender file has been saved, you want to make sure you save these images. So for each one, we'll need to go through and select them from the dropdown. That's our the AAA and save them. So we'll click on Image, Save As, and looks like it is automatically doing a relative path to the output folder. So yeah, by default in the zip folder, I included this conversion output folder, which has the texture saved there. And the red just means it's going to overwrite. We can go ahead and overwrite for this. So we'll want to, you can change the color settings over here. Leave as RGB, that's color. RGBA includes alpha. Um, so if you know what that is, you can include that. I've always had issues with baking out alpha, so I don't know if this will bake out your alpha textures if you had anything fancy. Color depth 8, unless you had everything, unless your original was 16. I don't know if you even support 16, but color depth 8. Compression, I think by default it's like 15. I recommend putting up to 100. It takes a little bit longer to save it, but it'll have a lower file size, which is good for your download size and I think Unity. I think that helps with the download size on Unity. I'm not sure if it changes. I know if you put crunch compress on other things, it'll recompress it, but it's good habit. Just go ahead and put the compression to 100. It's saving as a PNG, which is lossless. So saying that compression up to 100% is all perfect and fine. You won't lose any quality. That's the nice thing about PNG is for very basic images, they'll have a low file size while still having no loss. So PNG is a great file format. Click Save, and you see it'll do a little mouse. And then we'll go through and we'll do that for every single one of these. So just give me a moment. I'm going to be contradictory and not set the compression just so I can go through this faster for demonstration purposes. Appears we have an error. Our short hair didn't break. Well, we'll go ahead and fix that in a second. Oh, huh. That is weird. Obviously it baked, but it's reverted back to the old texture for some odd reason. I have not seen this before. Um, well, I'm going to troubleshoot this live and click bake again and see if this will have resolved the problem. That is very bizarre. I've never seen it do that. And this is one of the weird things about baking is it can be very buggy at times. I've had all sorts of bizarre problems happen. This one seems a little new to even me. Um, hmm. Bake is taking longer on one of the materials. Once we got to the something. Didn't do this last time. Well, this is fun. Sometimes things break. Huh. Oh, we'll see what happens. I'll probably keep this in because it's a good learning opportunity for Blender baking. Nope, it looks like the watch saved out uh, was correct this time. Let's go ahead and save it. I'm not sure why we lost it last time. Yeah, watch and short hair are working this time. That is bizarre. So, at this point we saved out everything. Because I had to rebake it. Some of them are left unsaved, but that's fine. We don't need to worry about that. Okay, so that's now all our diffuse colors. If you didn't have any emissions on your avatar, at this point you would be ready. You'd be good to go. You would just take these over to Unity and put them on your avatar, and yeah, everything's now converted for you. Um, there's some stuff in here that's from the beta, which is converting the sweater, but most stuff in here, yeah, we're ready. But if you have emissions, like on the watch, we'll want to convert that now. So we'll do the same thing, except for bake type, we'll select emit, and there's no like shading or coloring or whatever to select, it's just emit, there's nothing else for here. And again, we just click bake, and we'll have to wait through the baking process again. I'll go ahead and pause it. Okay, so the texture baking has finished, and you'll see that most of these will be black. I just updated the icons here, but most of these will be black because we didn't have any emissions for them. But for like texturing, we'll see, hey, it's we have the not texturing for accessories, we now have the emission. So we'll save that out. You'll need to change the name because we don't want to override our colors. Um, so it looks like I already have one titled for emit in there. So we probably just want to go ahead and override that. Just click on it and it'll copy the name. Still red because it's overriding it, which is fine. Let's click save. And then we'll want to do that for the watch as well. Click save. We'll find watch emit because we're doing emissions. And save. And then let's see, body. If you really want to save out the blush, you can. If you want to go back to the old emission blush, you can do that. And I have a body emit there as well. And that should be the end of it. I went ahead and went through basically everything in here. I know I'm a little sick, but this won't be like a forever tutorial. It's just long enough to help people get from V1 to V2. So I'll probably keep this as the official tutorial. Um, Anyways, I hope this helped. If you have any questions, please join the Discord and you can message me there or ask other users for help if I'm not available. I usually try to get back within 24 hours or so, but this is not what I do for a living. This is just a hobby on the side, so please give me some time to get back and help. Um, Again, thank you for your support and hope you really enjoy the Cat V2 as much as I do. It's been a year of hard work to get it to where it is now, and I think it's a lot better than where it started. Anyways, thank you.